Welcome to the video tutorial for my At the Beach fingerless gloves. This is a warm and cozy glove, but I think it's more feminine than most of the unisex gloves that I normally do. It features several rows of a shell stitch, separated by rows of what I like to call my wave rows, hence the name At the Beach. This glove uses basic crochet stitches, mainly double crochet and single crochet back loop only, so I think it's appropriate for just about any level crochet. The materials we'll be using today are a 4-ounce yarn, a 6.0 millimeter hook, a 6.5 millimeter hook, and an optional stitch marker. So if you're ready, let's begin. We'll start with our cuff. Okay, to begin our cuff, I'm using a 6.0 millimeter hook and I have a slip knot. And I'm using today a yarn from Hobby Lobby there. I love this yarn. I don't remember the name of it, but it's just a 4-ounce yarn. So to begin our cuff, we're just going to start like I always do with a chain 13. Now, as always, you certainly can make your cuff as wide as you would like, but for the purposes of this video, I'm going to chain 13, then we'll single crochet back down and I'll have a stitch count of 12 for my cuff. So go ahead and chain your 13 and then I'll pick you back up and we'll work our way back down with single crochets. Okay, here are my 13 chains. And like I said, all we're going to do for this very first part is just place a single crochet in each of these chain stitches back down. I should have a stitch count of 12 when I get to the end. And then this is the only row that it's going to be straight single crochets. After this, we'll start the ribbing part of our cuff and we'll be working mainly in single crochet back loop only. But I'll show you that when we get there. So go ahead, place a single crochet in each of your chains back down, and then I'll pick you up when we get to the end. We'll chain one and turn, and we'll start working on our single crochet back loop only. See you for that. Okay, here's my 12 single crochets, and at the end of each row on our cuff, we're going to chain one and turn. Work our way back down the other side. So to achieve our ribbed look, this is what we're going to do. I have 12 stitches here. The very first stitch and the very last stitch, we're going to place a regular single crochet. And then in the middle 10, we're going to be working in the back loop only. Here's the front loop. Here's the back loop. We'll be working single crochet back loop only. So the first stitch and last stitch is a regular single crochet, like you always do, under both of those loops. Now these middle 10, we're going to take our hook and place it just in that back loop, not under both of them, just in that back loop. Work your single crochet. So that's a single crochet back loop only. Again, here's the front loop, here's the back loop. Hope you can see that. Take your hook, put it in that back loop only, draw your yarn up, work your single crochet. So we'll do the single crochet back loop only in stitches 2 through 11. The first stitch and last stitch is a regular single crochet. So work that all the way down. When we get to the end, I'll pick you back up and we'll go over it maybe one more time before we start working a bunch of our rows together. So single crochet first stitch, single crochet last stitch, single crochet back loop only in your middle. And I'll pick you up at the end of this row. Okay, I actually decided to do a few rows and check in with you just so I can just go ahead and show you the nice ribbing that this stitch makes with our single crochet back loop only. Can you see the ribbing? Once you get a few rows down, it really starts to show up. It's very stretchy. It holds its shape. But I wanted to just show you, go over one more time how we end each row and then start each row. So I'm at the end. I did my single crochet in the beginning. I've done 10 single crochet back loops only. I'm on my 12th stitch where I go under both of those loops like a regular single crochet, and that's how we finish each row. And also to finish each row, we do a chain one and we turn. So just to go over it a little bit more, I know a lot of y'all already know how to do this, but for those who it's your first time, first stitch is a regular single crochet. these inside 10 stitches here are going to be a single crochet back loop only. In stitches for me, it'll be stitches 2 through 11. And then my final stitch is a regular single crochet. So I don't know, I've done maybe, 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, maybe like 12 rows. Again, I'm going to go ahead and do 30 rows. So I will catch up with you at the end of my 30th row, where I'll show you how we're going to join our short ends together and slip stitch in order to make our cuff, and then we'll start with the glove portion. So just one more time, single crochet first stitch, single crochet last stitch, single crochet back loop only in these middle 10. So I'll see you when I finish, get to the end of my 30th row. See you then. Okay, I'm on the end of my 30th row. I've got 2 more stitches. So my last one is my last one that's the single crochet back loop only. And my final stitch, of course, is a regular single crochet for my end stitch. Okay, here's my 30 stitches. So to make our cuff, we have to draw our short ends together. And what we're going to do is slip stitch up and down each of these rows. And it's very simple. What you do, you put your hook in that first stitch on this side. You put your hook in the first stitch on that side. You grab your yarn, you pull it through both sides, and you do a slip stitch. Hope you can see that. All right, here's the second stitch on this side. Put my hook through that second stitch. I'll put it through the second stitch on this side. I'll grab my yarn, pull it through both sides, and slip stitch. Now we're going to do that all the way down, 12 different stitches. I'll go in the third stitch on this side, third stitch on that side, fourth, fourth, all the way down. And when we get to the end, we'll do a chain to kind of, close it tight. We'll flip it right side out, and then we'll get started on our glove. So just slip stitch back and forth in and out of each of these. Do a chain 1 after you do your 12th slip stitch. Flip it inside out, and I'll see you there to start our glove. Okay, here's our cuff. I think it's super cute. It's nice and ribbed, very stretchy. We did our slip stitch for our seam, chained 1, and we flipped it right side out. I've switched to my 6.5 millimeter hook to do the remainder for our glove. So this is where I said earlier you might want to use an optional stitch marker, because what we're going to do now for this first row is single crochet as evenly as we can around the top of our cuff. Now your stitch count for this glove matters. For a small, you need a stitch count of 26. I'm doing 31, which is like a medium/large. If you do an extra large, you're going to do 36. Our stitch count is multiples of 5 plus 1. So 26, 31, or 36. I'm doing 31. So if you want, this is, folded in half. Here's my first stitch. Sometimes I'll place a stitch marker here halfway down. So I know that from the beginning to this stitch marker, which is halfway, I need to be halfway with my stitches. So from here to here, I know I need 15. And from the back side, from there to there, I need 16. So if I get down here and I've only done maybe 12, I've spaced them too far apart and have to take it out and do it again. So it's just a little visual to help you know halfway around if you're spacing them evenly or not. So take your 6.5 millimeter hook, and as evenly as you can, do a single crochet around the top of your cuff to match your stitch count, which will be either 26, 31, or 36. I'll pick you up at the end to show you how for this and each row we're going to slip stitch to join and then continue on. So single crochet evenly around to match your stitch count. I'll pick you up at the end and we'll go from there. Okay, I'm coming to the end of row 1 where we've been placing a single crochet around the top of our cuff to match our glove stitch count, which again for me is 31. So this was 29, so I've got 2 more. This is 30, and then this is 30. Oop, lost my yarn. This is 31. So this row and every single row, we're going to slip stitch to join in our first stitch. Not in a chain, but in our first stitch. So on row 1, we'll slip stitch to join in this first single crochet, just like that. So that's the end of row 1. This is just kind of a base to build our glove off of. So I will see you for row 2. Okay, we're starting row 2. And in case I don't mention it every row, after you slip stitch to join in that first stitch, do a chain 1. So I've already done my chain 1. So just like we slip stitch to join in that first stitch, every row will also start in that same stitch where we slip stitch to join. Hope that makes sense. So for row 2, super simple, we're going to do a single crochet, back loop only, in each stitch around. Now remember, that's the stitch we used with our cuff, the single crochet back loop only. We're going to do that every stitch around. Stick your hook in that back loop and work your single crochet. So my stitch count is 31, so I'll be placing 31 single crochet, back loop only, in each stitch around. When we get to the end, we'll slip stitch to join in this first single crochet like we've been doing, but I'll pick you up near the end. So single crochet, back loop only, all the way around. I'll pick you up over here to finish it. See you then. Okay, I'm coming to the end of row 2 where we've been putting a single crochet back loop only in each stitch around. So I've got a few stitches left. This is 29, 30, and 31. So once again, every time we'll slip stitch to join in this first stitch, just like that. And we'll go ahead and chain 1. The single crochet back loop only, when you're doing it just in a row, gives you a little tiny bit of texture. Can you see that right there? It's not just a flat stitch. It gives you a little raised bit, which is going to look really nice for this pattern. So that's the end of row 2. We're getting ready to start our first of our shell stitch rows for row 3. So I'll see you for row 3. Okay, row 3 is the first of our shell stitch rows. And each time we do a shell stitch row, the stitch sequence will be the same, but we won't always start in the same stitch because we want our shells to be staggered. So it's a super simple stitch sequence. We start back in this same stitch where we slip stitch to join, and you start with a single crochet, just like that. So now we're going to skip the next 2 stitches. So skip those next 2. And in this stitch, we're going to place 5 double crochets in the same stitch. So there's 1. You go right back in that same stitch. Place another one. Back in that same stitch for the 3rd one. Back in that same stitch for the 4th one. And the 5th one. So we have a single crochet, we skip 2 stitches, and then we put 5 double crochets in the same stitch. Now we skip the next 2 stitches and start over. So that's the stitch sequence. I'll show you one more time. Single crochet, skip 2, 1, 2, and then 5 double crochets in the next stitch. Then after you do the 5 double crochets, you skip 2 stitches and start all over again. So we'll do that all the way around for row 3. Single crochet, skip 2 stitches, 5 double crochets in the next stitch, skip 2 stitches, and do it again. I think this is 5. Yeah. So that's our stitch sequence for row 3. I'll pick you up near the end to show you how this row ends. So that's our first shell stitch row. There's the little shell stitch. I'll pick you up at the end of row 3 and we'll go from there. See you then. Okay, I'm coming to the end of row 3, which is our first shell stitch row. So there they are. So I just finished my 5 double crochets in the same stitch. We have 3 stitches left. So after our shell stitch, we skip 2 spaces and then do a single crochet. So this row ends with just a single crochet. So as we've been doing, we slip stitch to join in our first stitch, which is this single crochet right there. So here's our first shell stitch row. There's lots of ways to do shells. Some people do more than 5 or put a chain in the middle, but this is how I do it, just 5 double crochets. So that's already looking pretty, don't you think? All right, I'll see you for rows 4 and 5. We're going to go through those pretty quickly, but I'll see you for the beginning of row 4. Okay, so rows 4 and 5 are going to be a repeat of our single crochet back loop only row. And again, we'll start in the same stitch where we slip stitch to join, putting your hook in that back loop only, drawing it up and doing your single crochet. So we'll place a single crochet back loop only in each stitch around, and you should still have your same stitch count. I should still have 31 stitches. It just works out that way. So single crochet back loop only each stitch around for row 4. When you get back to the beginning, slip stitch to join in this first one, excuse me, and then row 5 is exactly the same. Single crochet back loop only. So row 4 and row 5, single crochet back loop only each stitch around. So go ahead and do that. Row 4, single crochet back loop only all the way around, slip stitch to join in this first one, chain 1, row 5, do the same thing again. So I'll pick you up for the end of row 5 and we'll move on to our second shell stitch row. So I'll see you at the end of row 5. Okay, I'm coming to the end of row 5, which is our second row of single crochet back loop only. Rows 4 and 5 were single crochet back loop only. So I'm on stitch, get in there. This is 29. Put my hook in that back loop for 30. And then my last stitch is 31. And then we slip stitch to join like we've been doing in this first single crochet like that, and go ahead and chain 1. So that's the end of row 5. So we have our shell stitch row, and then we have these 2 rows of single crochet back loop only. Row 6 is going to be our next shell stitch row. So let's go ahead and go right into that. Okay, so for row 6 is another shell stitch row, but like I said, I don't want them stacked on top of each other, so we're going to stagger them a little bit. So it'll be the same stitch sequence as down here, but we're going to start in a different place. So we're going to start in a little bit strange way. We go back into our same stitch where we've been starting, and we're going to start with a half of a shell, which is going to be 3 double crochets. So right off the bat in this first stitch, we're just going to do 3 double crochets, and we'll put the other half of that shell on the end. So we have our 3 double crochets right here. Skip 2, and now we start our regular stitch sequence of the single crochet, skip 2, and then the 5 double crochets for our regular shell. So just like we did before, single crochet, skip 2, 5 double crochets in the same stitch for our shell, skip 2, and do it again. Single crochet, skip 2, 5 double crochets, skip 2, do it again. So here's my 5. Is that 5? 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Yeah. Skip 2, skip that one, and do it again. So it's the same stitch sequence. We just started with kind of a half shell here with 3. And I'll show you when we come to the end how we're going to make that a full shell and how we'll join. So 3 double crochets in that very first stitch, skip 2, Then start with your single crochet, skip 2, 5 double crochets, skip 2, and start it again. See how that's falling in the middle? So we don't want our shells stacked up. So do that all the way around for row 6. I'll pick you up here near the end because we're going to be ending it in a little bit different way. So I'll see you for that. Okay, I'm coming to the end of row 6, which has been our second shell stitch row. And we started with 3 double crochets and then skipped 2 and then started our regular sequence of single crochet, skip 2, 5 double crochets, skip 2. So I just finished a shell stitch of 5 double crochets. I've got a few stitches left. So I'll skip 2, do my single crochet, skip 2 like we do, and now I'm on my last stitch. So we started here with 3. Normally my shell stitches have 5, but for whatever reason with this pattern, to keep our stitch count right, instead of doing just 2 to make this a 5 double crochet shell, we're going to have to do 3. So this shell, and it's the only time this happens, will have 6 double crochets in it total instead of 5. Somehow it just worked out that way to keep my stitch sequence right. So we start the row with 3 double crochets, we end the row with 3 double crochets. And in this end, we'll slip stitch to join in the top of this first double crochet of that half shell. Oops, and we'll chain 1. So here's our second shell stitch row. You can see how they're staggered. They're not on top of each other. I think that looks a lot better. And then here's our 2 rows of the single crochet back loop only. To me, and this is why I call it at the beach, it just, with our shells, these end up looking kind of like waves. And I just think it looks really pretty how that flows on top of that. So that's how it got its name. Anyway, that's the end of row 6. Now for 7 and 8, we're going to repeat these 2 back loop only rows. So we'll go through those pretty quickly as well. But I'll see you back for row 7 and row 8. Okay, so rows 7 and 8 are going to be a repeat of our 2 single crochet back loop only rows. So we'll scoot through those really quickly. So once again, just put your hook in that back loop only and work your single crochet all the way around. So row 7, single crochet back loop only, each stitch around. When you get to the end, we'll slip stitch to join in that first single crochet, chain 1, chain 1, and then go straight into row 8 where we do it again, single crochet, back loop only, each stitch around. Super simple. So I'll go ahead and work my row 7 and my row 8, single crochet back loop only, and I'll pick you up at the end of row 8 where we slip stitch to join and move on to another shell stitch row. So I'll see you for the end of row 8. Okay, I'm at the end of row 8, which is our second row of the single crochet back loop only. And I just wanted to close it out with you to slip stitch to join. So I'm on stitch 29, 30, and 31. Hopefully your stitch count is, I can't hold on to this yarn for some reason. Hopefully your stitch count is coming out right. But if it's not, we are the No Stress Crochet group here. If you get to the end and you need 31 and you're only 30, just throw another one in right there. It's a good time to catch up with your stitch count. So that's my 31. We slip stitch to join in our first single crochet and chain 1. So we have rows 1 through 8 here. Now row 9, we're going to repeat our first shell stitch row. We've already done that. So we're going to repeat this row. We'll do a couple of more of these back loop only rows. Then we're going to get into our thumb. So I'll see you back for row 9 and we'll repeat our shell stitch row. Okay, since we just finished our 2 rows of single crochet back loop only, we're going to do another shell stitch row. And this is going to be a repeat of this first one. So we're back to our regular stitch sequence, which if you remember is single crochet. This is really a very simple pattern. Single crochet, skip 2, 1, 2, and then do your shell stitch, or the way I do a shell stitch, of 5 double crochets. Then you'll skip 2 and start again. Single crochet, skip 2, 5 double crochets in the same stitch, skip 2, and start it all over again. So we're going to do this row of shell stitch. We'll do 2 more of our single crochet back loop only rows, another shell stitch row, and then we'll get to our thumb. And this one, sometimes my thumbs are a crocheted area. This will have a slit for our thumb, so it'll be simple. So this is how we do row 9. Single crochet, skip 2, 5 double crochets in that same stitch, skip 2, and start it all over again. Very, very easy stitch sequence. So do that for row 9 all the way around. This one will end with the skip 2 and single crochet. We'll slip stitch to join in our first stitch. I think I'll pick you up at the end to show you how we're going to end this row. Single crochet, skip 2, our shell stitch, which is 5 double crochets in the same stitch, skip 2, start it again. I'll see you for the end of row 9. All right, I'm at the end of row 9, which is another shell stitch row, the same one as we did down here. I just finished my last shell stitch. We have 3 stitches left, so I skipped those 2, and this row ends with a single crochet. Don't you just love it when your stitch count comes out right? Makes it very nice. So as we've been doing, we slip stitch to join in this first single crochet, chain 1. That's the end of row 9. Now the next 2 rows, rows 10 and 11, I'm sure you know, are a repeat of these. We'll do 2 rows of the single crochet back loop only. So I'll start you off on row 10, we'll finish at the end of row 11, and we'll go from there. So I'll see you for row 10. Okay, like I said, rows 10 and 11 are a repeat of our 2 rows of single crochet back loop only. Super, super, super simple. So for row 10, I've already chained 1, single crochet back loop only in each stitch around. When you get to the end, we slip stitch to join in that first stitch, and row 11 will be the same thing. Single crochet back loop only again. I think this is just a simplest pattern. It doesn't look simple, but I think it's also very feminine. A lot of my stuff is unisex, but I think this is a pretty feminine glove. I think it's pretty. Anyway, row 10 and 11, both of them are single crochet back loop only. When you finish row 10, slip stitch to join in your first stitch, chain 1, row 11, same thing, single crochet back loop only. I'll pick you up at the end of row 11. Okay, I'm coming to the end of row 11, which is our second row of single crochet back loop only. And again, I've got 2 stitches left for 30 and 31. Again, if you get to the end of this row and your stitch count is off, this is a good time to fix it by putting 2 in one row or maybe joining 2 together, whatever you need to do. So we're going to slip stitch to join like we've been doing in this first stitch, just like that. And now we're ready for row 12. So we're going to do another row of shell stitch like this middle one where we start a little bit different. Then we'll go into our thumb row. So I'll pick you up for row 12. Okay, row 12 is a repeat of this shell stitch row where we start with the 3 double crochets, kind of a half shell before we go into our regular stitch sequence. That way our shells don't stack up on top of each other. So we start this row with 3 double crochets in the same stitch. 1, 2, and 3. And then we'll end the row with 3 more and kind of finish that shell off. So we skip 2, 1, 2, then we start our regular sequence of single crochet, skip 2, and then our shell stitch, which is the 5 double crochets in that same stitch. Then we'll skip 2 and start over. Single crochet, skip 2, shell stitch, which is 5 double crochets in the same stitch, skip 2, and do it again. So we'll work this all the way around, and when we get to the end, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4. When we get to the end, I'll pick you up because you know this one ends a little bit differently because of this half shell. So 3 double crochets in the first stitch for that half shell, skip 2, then start your sequence of single crochet, skip 2, shell stitch, skip 2, and do it again. I'll pick you up at the end and we'll join and finish this shell. See you then. Okay, I'm coming to the end of row 12, which is a shell stitch row, but we started it with this half shell here. So I just finished a regular 5 double crochet shell. We skip 2, we do our single crochet, we skip 2, and our last stitch, we're going to finish off this shell just like we started with 3 double crochets. This is the only shell stitch that has 6 double crochets. It just works out that way. All right, so there's 1, 2, and 3 in that last stitch. We'll slip stitch to join in the top of that first double crochet that we started with. Chain 1. Okay, so there's our 4 rows of shell stitch. They're separated by our little kind of wave rows, really, of our single crochet back loop only. All right, rows 13 and 14 are a repeat of these back loop only rows, except we're going to work on our thumb slit, so it's going to be a little bit different. So I'll pick you up for rows 13 and 14. Okay, we're on row 13, and this is where we're going to start our thumb row. We just finished a shell stitch row, which means we need our 2 rows of single crochet back loop only, and that's where our thumb will be. So we will be working only in single crochet back loop only, but in the first 3 stitches, so we'll do the first 3 stitches our regular single crochet back loop only, like we've been doing. So the first 3 stitches. Then we'll follow that with 4 chain stitches. 1, 2, 3, and 4. So when we chain, we skip. So we have to skip 4 stitches. 1, 2, 3, 4. So in this 5th stitch, after we skip 4, we'll pick back up with our single crochet back loop only. And then we'll just simply finish out the rest of the row with single crochet back loop only. So we're doing the same thing we've been doing with these rows. We're just leaving a little spot for our thumb. So again, rows 13 and 14 are single crochet back loop only, but we have to make a space here. So the first 3 stitches are the back loop only, then we do a chain 4 and we skip 4, then we just pick right back up with our single crochet back loop only, and we'll finish out row 13 just with a single crochet back loop only in each stitch. So do that, come back, slip stitch to join in our first stitch like we've been doing, and then for 14 it'll be our second single crochet back loop only row, but we'll have to deal with this thumb area. So row 13, 3 single crochet back loop only, chain 4, skip 4, and then pick back up with your single crochet back loop only the remainder of your stitches around. Get to the end, slip stitch to join, chain 1, and I'll pick you up for row 14 where we'll finish off our thumb. Okay, on row 14, we're going to do another row of our single crochet back loop only, but we have to deal with this thumb area. So just like we did in the previous row, the first 3 stitches will be, if I can get it in there, will be a single crochet back loop only, just like we did with row 13. So there's 1, 2, and 3. Single crochet back loop only. Now we're at this area where we did the chains. So we're going to just do, around these 4 chains, we're going to do 4 regular single crochets. Just go all the way around those chain stitches and make a single crochet. So we'll do that 4 times. 1, 2, 3, and 4. Now we're back to where we picked up our single crochet back loop only before, and that's what we'll do this time as well. We'll pick back up with our single crochet back loop only, and we'll work that on the remaining stitches of this row 14. So again, for row 14, you start just the same way as we did the previous row with 3 single crochet back loop only. Then you get to these chains, work 4 regular single crochets around that chain, kind of secures that. Then pick back up with your single crochet back loop only and finish that each stitch around. When you get to the end, slip stitch to join. Now this, doing it like this, is really a good pattern for your left hand by the way the seam will fall. I have in my written pattern how to do it for your right hand, and it's just kind of the opposite. You do this towards the end of the row instead of the beginning. So keep that in mind. This is mostly for like a left hand. Doesn't have to be done left hand and right hand, but I do have it in the written pattern if you want to do the opposite way for your right hand up. So again, row 14, 3 single crochet back loop onlys. When you get to these chains, 4 regular single crochets around those chains, then pick back up with your single crochet back loop only all the way around, slip stitch to join, chain 1, and we're going to finish it out with 3 quick more rows. So let's see you for that. Okay, we're on row 15. We finished our thumb area. We're going to do one more shell stitch row, which will be this initial one that has our regular stitch sequence. So just as a reminder as to what that is, we start out with a single crochet. We skip 2 places, skip 2 stitches, 1, 2, 1, 2. Then we do our shell stitch which is 5 double crochets in the same stitch. So 1, 2, 3, 4, right back in that same stitch, and 5, like that, to make our shell. Then we skip 2 stitches and do it again. So the stitch sequence is single crochet, skip 2, your shell stitch, which is 5 double crochets in that same stitch, skip 2, do it again. Single crochet, skip 2, shell stitch, skip 2. Do that all the way around. When you get to the end, you're going to end on a single crochet. Then we're going to slip stitch to join in this first single crochet, chain 1, and then we have 2 more rows of just a little border to end off our glove. So we're almost there. So go ahead and work row 15, which is our basic shell stitch row, single crochet, skip 2, shell stitch, skip 2, all the way around. Slip stitch to join, chain 1, and I'll pick you up to end off our glove. See you for that. All right, we are so close to finishing this glove. We have 2 more rows, rows 16 and 17. And since we just finished the shell stitch row, we still have to do 2 more of these single crochet back loop only rows. And that's how we're going to end. So rows 16 and 17, both rows are just a single crochet back loop only in each stitch around. That'll give us a nice finishing edge to our glove. So go ahead for row 16, single crochet, back loop only, every stitch around. You know what to do when you get to the end. Slip stitch to join in this first stitch, chain 1, row 17, same thing, single crochet, back loop only in each stitch around. So I will pick you up once we finish rows 16 and 17, and we'll look at our glove. I'll see you then. And here is our finished glove. I think it's just a really pretty pattern. You know, you always want your fingerless gloves to be warm and cozy, and this certainly is that. But this one also, to me, is a lot more feminine than a lot of the unisex patterns I do. It's warm and cozy. It's got a tight stitch sequence, and it's got a nice cozy ribbed cuff. But with the shell stitches and the gentle waves, I call them wave stitches going across, I don't know, I just think it's a really pretty and feminine pattern. So I hope you enjoyed making this glove as much as I enjoyed showing you how. And if you like it, please share it with all of your crochet friends. Also, be sure and hit subscribe so you always get notified when the next tutorial gets published. As always, there'll be many more to come. Until then, happy hooking!